What's up, guys? Welcome back to Hands On Channel. I was just out here putting up a few of my preps that I just recently picked up. Some of this stuff I went over to the dollar store and got, and other stuff I've been shopping around at my local stores trying to get this stuff when it's either on a clearance or a closeout or just on sale or whatever. But get this stuff while you can, guys, because I think SHTF is coming. It's kind of a slow motion thing right now, but I think it's actually happening every day. If you watch the news, you're going to see this stuff happening. So as I was putting my stuff away and just kind of inventorying my stockpile, I thought, it's time I make a video about 10 non-food items that are essential to buy right now before winter, before the SHTF comes, before dark winter, or before Build Back Better or the Great Reset has a chance to fully ruin your life and, whatever, take you out of the workforce or maybe shut your power off in the middle of the winter. Who knows what will happen? But we do have all of these threats as a possibility. So because of that, I wrote a little quick list of 10 things that are non-food items that you should probably go check and see if you've got plenty of right now. If you don't, you need to redouble your efforts and go ahead and get stocked up on this stuff. This is not really in any certain order. I just threw them down and I numbered them just to keep the video going along here. So number 10, firewood and tinder. And I know to you people, especially you people that are living in the cities and in urban environments, you're probably not thinking about that at all because you probably don't have a wood stove and you more than likely don't even have a functional fireplace. If you do have a fireplace that's just kind of there and you've never really used it, you should probably look into what it's going to take to get that thing going so that way you don't have to find out in freezing temperatures if the power went off or if the grid collapsed or something terrible like that happened. So firewood and tinder, number 10. So even if you don't have one, even if you don't have a wood stove, you're thinking, why would I stock up on firewood? Well, because have you ever seen a movie where they start out and it's like under the bridge in LA or New York City or something, and there's a bunch of homeless guys standing around a burning barrel to keep warm, to keep from freezing to death? That may be you if you don't have a wood stove, but at least if you have some firewood to put into that barrel, you'll be able to heat yourself and your family. If you've never slept in cold climates, you probably don't know what you're going to be getting yourself into. But, wait till the winter time. Just go turn the heat off and see how comfortably you sleep during the night. Even with all your covers, you're going to be really cold, especially once the house gets down below freezing. So I advise you to, first of all, if you can afford it and you can find it and get it done right now, probably be a good idea to throw a wood stove in or at least have all of the components necessary. Maybe you don't want to install it, but you have all of the components necessary to where if something did happen, you could install the thing. And it might not be necessarily a permanent installation if you catch my drift. So you may have to go through a door or a window or something like that. But I would do it safely, obviously, the safest way you can. Because, obviously starting a fire of any kind inside of your house is a big deal. But if you don't have that thing adequately vented, you and your family could die of carbon monoxide poisoning. So don't be foolish about it. So I personally think at a certain point it would be better to take the chance of running the pipe out of the window than it would be to sit there and freeze to death. So you may want to consider that or some other source of heat that you can, backup heat source, whether it runs on propane, off the grid, on your own tanks, or something that's safe that you can use to keep your family warm. Preferably, you don't have to stand outside by a barrel, but worst case scenario, you've at least got some firewood and some tinder so you can start a fire and keep yourself from freezing to death. I think that's really important, especially as we approach winter. Number 9, medications. So you're going to want, and I'm just talking basic over-the-counter stuff like aspirin, ibuprofen, neosporin, iodine, alcohol, peroxide, I can't remember what the one's called, but like the Oragel stuff that you put on your gums and your teeth if you get a toothache and things like that. Those are going to be really, really important things to have if the grid goes down and you can't get those things. So a lot of this stuff is also a good bartering item. One thing you might want to consider is that, if we're living in an off-grid situation, you're probably going to be wearing your socks and your underwear a lot longer than you normally would and your pants and stuff before you wash them because it's just not going to be convenient to wash your clothes. So you're going to have to wear them a lot longer and before you wash them. And that's going to bring other stuff like, athlete's foot and things like that. Just if you don't have running water, then obviously your hygiene is not going to be as good as it is if you can go and jump in the shower. So these are things to think about now before the SHTF happens. Number 8, bleach. And it's sort of along the same lines. You know, you need bleach for a disinfectant, but it has numerous other uses beyond just washing your clothes and stuff like that. So bleach is a great thing to stockpile. The only thing bad about bleach is that it actually has a shelf life. So you don't really want to stock up on too much of the stuff because it could actually go bad. There's a shelf life for bleach, and I don't really know what that is, but I'll take my chances. Stock up on bleach. I would say you should probably at least get 4 or 5 gallons of the stuff while it's cheap right now, and just have it out in your, your shed, or maybe out in your storage room or something like that for SHTF events. If things started happening and you need to disinfect a large area to do some sort of surgery or other stuff like that, or even just like washing dishes, if you ran out of dishwashing soap, you could use bleach to disinfect your dishes. And if you're putting water up for long-term storage, they recommend that you put a tiny amount of bleach in each one of the bottles, and that's supposed to help disinfect it and keep you from getting sick in the future. So those are all things to think about right now. And along the same lines, you see behind me here, I've got a couple of bottles of the LA's Totally Awesome degreaser. It's the same sort of thing. I'm stocking up on that and dish soap and stuff, just so that if our supply in the house runs out, I'll have some out here in the shop my wife won't know about, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I've got some other degreaser, and I've got some other alternatives that we can use when we deplete the stuff we already have in the house. I kind of like to have backups to my backups. So number 7, back here behind me, you can see I've got all these buckets, and you want buckets and lids and containers and things like that. One way to do that is just save the old containers. Now, I'm not a coffee drinker, but my cousin is, and he saves all these coffee containers for me, and I use them for just stuff around the shop. A lot of times I'll use them for washers and, miscellaneous screws that I'm pulling out of a project that I want to save for the future, because I think fasteners are going to be in short supply one day. And if nothing else, a lot of that stuff is getting more and more expensive every time you go to the store. So saving these old fasteners like the old timers used to do makes a lot of sense, because the stuff's expensive. And sometimes you're in the middle of a job and you need a certain weird kind of a screw. And if you've been saving up fasteners, chances are you might have that thing, or at least something that you can make work for that situation. So I saved the coffee ones from my cousin, and these are from peanuts. These are great. So if you got your old peanut containers, when you finish them off, you can save these. I mean, you can clean this out and disinfect it and put rice or beans in that right there. That would be a perfect size to take out in a backpack if you were going out to do recon and possibly bartering with other people. I don't know what that would be. Maybe 3/4 of a pound, or maybe half a pound of rice or something like that, or beans. That would be a big deal for trading in the future. So save these containers. Not sure what this one was, but it was just a weird container I saved. But the point is I rinse these out and I bleach them out. I use some of that bleach, and also get these buckets. Now, if you're going to be using anything like potable water, or actually putting straight rice into these buckets, or anything like that that's straight food, you're going to want to get food grade buckets, not these Lowe's buckets, because apparently these Lowe's buckets are made out of the kind of plastic that you don't want to leave food sitting in contact with them for long periods of time. Now, I would argue you could probably get away with using these buckets if you bag everything in like Mylar bags, or what do they call them? Vacuum sealed bags, those kinds of deals, because then it wouldn't be in direct contact with the bucket. But just be smart about that. And especially when it comes to water and liquids, I would think. I wouldn't want to be drinking water that had sat in one of these for very long, because the plastics could leach out into that water, and long term it can make you sick. Now, again, you got to weigh the pros and cons in a survival situation. I mean, you may have to take a risk and drink some of that water in a survival situation. So I would have all sorts of these buckets, and just know whether they're food grade or not, and get some specifically for water if you're going to store water for long term. And speaking of that, someone else they work in some application that basically they end up with these big containers of industrial bleach, and they've just been throwing them away. And I'm like, whoa, hey, wait a minute. That's the only thing that's had in there was industrial bleach? And they were like, yeah. And there's still just a little tiny bit. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up, but there's a little tiny bit left in each one. So I know these jugs already are 100% sanitary and ready to use. And I would guess looking at it, that's probably about a 3-gallon, maybe 2.5, 3-gallon container. This is ready made for storing water. Now, one thing with clear containers is you don't want to let sunlight get in there, because that can actually make the water start to form algae and stuff like that, and scum. But I would argue that with these containers, with the industrial bleach in there, I could probably rinse them out lightly, and I wouldn't have to do anything else but rinse them out lightly and then fill them up with drinking water. And yeah, it might have a slight smell of bleach the first couple of times you fill it up, but also that's going to disinfect that water and keep it good for long term. So I've got several of these things, and I'm having my buddy save more and more of these things for me, because again, even if I don't use them all, because for me and my wife, I only need to store so much water. So if I get to a point where I have more of these than I can use, I'll put them up high somewhere in my attic space in my big shop, and I might want to barter with these someday. Containers are super duper important when the crap hits the fan. I can't stress it enough. I told you guys in the last video that I'm a big fan of Les Stroud's Survivor Man, and that's one of the number one things he comes across. Almost every episode of Survivor Man, he's looking for a container of some kind. And if he could find something like this, man, he'd be in heaven. Now, it's a little heavy to carry around, but trust me, these things are going to be super valuable. The things that people discard as trash right now will be super valuable, especially if they're already ready to use like this one is, with just a minor rinsing. So stock up on containers. They're super cheap. You can probably do it for free if you know the right people. Next up on the list is number 6. And it's like disposable lighters and matches, because, you know, I know we all like to watch, like I said, I like to watch Survivor Man, and some of those episodes there, you know, and Dual Survival and stuff like that. And a lot of times they were, you know, starting fire with 2 sticks, and, you know, using a bow drill, and using, what's the other one? The ferrite rod and other things like that. Okay. And I have a ferrite rod. I keep that kind of stuff around, a different thing, you know, different ideas for different applications. When the lighters run out, when the Bic lighters run out, you're going to be glad you have some other way of starting a fire. No doubt about it. And it's good to know bow drills and all this other stuff, but it's hard to beat this right here. That's instant. I mean, these things are relatively cheap still. And if you get the little cheap Chinese ones, of course, they don't last as long. So I would probably recommend getting the Bics, or at least a decent quality lighter like this. And, you know, maybe get half a dozen of them, or a dozen. If you see them on sale, get 25 of them, whatever. They'll be good for starting fires, for doing that right there quickly. And you don't have to worry about rain and other things like that, as far as long as you keep it dry, you know, obviously. If you can keep it out of the moisture and, you know, hover over it when you're lighting that fire, you'll be able to light a fire with this a lot easier. Or even matches. You know, if you want to, stock up on matches as well. Again, I think both of these items will be critical for people that didn't think about it. And that is, you guys know, if you're on this channel watching this video, you know probably 90% of the people in your family think you're crazy, and they think that nothing's going to happen. And they think it's just the same as ever, and it's just some different president, and the Republicans are all freaking out about this. But this is not the same as ever. The economy is doing things that have never happened before, and they're being done intentionally. And other things are happening on a global scale that's making me think this is it. This is the time to be stocking up on this kind of stuff right here while you can get it for relatively cheap. And it'd be a good idea to get more than you would ever need in a lifetime, because again, you could barter that stuff. You could, you know, take one camping with you every time. If it never happens, if the SHTF never happens, then you take a Bic lighter with you camping every time you go, and whatever. No big deal. We're talking low investment, high return on investment if the SHTF happens. Again, I could just imagine people that are desperate enough for fire would trade you canned food for one of these things right here. I mean, this right here is a big deal. So, number 5, cotton balls and Q-tips. And this kind of, I almost put it in with general hygiene stuff, but it's a little bit different, because cotton balls, and especially if you take a little Vaseline and you mix that with a little cotton ball action, you can start a fire like that with that Bic lighter. I mean, it's really good tinder. That's the point. And you can put that in a Ziploc bag and keep it in your backpack, or put it in your back pocket, whatever. Q-tips are a big deal. I'm a real fanatic about every day I got to clean my ears out, and not only that, they're good for, I mean, going up your nose and stuff. Let's face it, whatever, any place that you need to probe up your nose and get that deep, dark booger out of there. I mean, it happens sometimes, and your finger is not quite small enough to reach up in there. That's where that Q-tip comes in, guys. I mean, so other things like that, if there was an instance where you got something in your eyeball, like in the corner of your eye or something, and you needed your wife to pick that out, a Q-tip would probably be a good way to do that, to get in there and get that little sliver out of there in an emergency situation. It's also great for like spreading ointments on cuts and different things like that to keep things more sterile. So definitely Q-tips and cotton balls, and also for cleaning your guns. I use Q-tips all the time in the shop. I mean, not just on guns, but if I'm working on like a carburetor, or I mean, just so many things that I've had to, that have sliding mechanisms in them. You have to get in there with a Q-tip and clean that grease out, and then put new grease in. I mean, they're just invaluable. So, and they're cheap right now. Even the off-brand ones, although I don't really like the off-brand ones, because a lot of times the little cotton ball falls off the end. So in that regard, unless you can find some good generic ones, I would get the Q-tip brand, because they seem to be the strongest. And also the little wand on the cheaper ones is a lot more flimsy. I've noticed when I'm trying to clean things that you need to put pressure on, the actual Q-tip ones are probably still worth it. So I recommend those. Number 4 on the list here, duct tape, paracord, and zip ties. So, I mean, duct tape has 1,000,001 uses, as you guys probably know. If you're following the prepper community, you can make all kinds of stuff out of it. You can make all kinds of repairs. I'll tell you a quick story. One time we had a hailstorm I think it was back in 2014, and I had some Gorilla duct tape. Okay, so to set the table here, we had a hailstorm come through, biggest hailstorm I've ever seen. It dropped like, they weren't quite baseball size, but they were close. And they were shooting out of the sky like they were shot out of a cannon too. And so it ruined our whole roof. We had to get our roof replaced under insurance deal. And it also ruined a skylight that I have in the kitchen. And at that time I had it was a plastic dome type skylight. Well, the hail broke through that, scared my daughter to death. She was sitting in the living room watching TV, and all of a sudden the thing shattered and a hailstone came in, and then of course water started coming in. So as soon as it was safe enough, I got out there, even though it was still thundering and lightning and all hell was breaking loose in the sky. I got out there and jumped on the roof with a roll of Gorilla duct tape. And man, that stuff is impressive. I pulled off a couple of pieces of it. I covered up. I completely patched over. I had to kind of dry it off with my sleeve of my shirt. I dried it off the best I could, and I started covering up that hole in my roof in my skylight with Gorilla duct tape. And you know what? That Gorilla tape didn't leak one drop, and it lasted for like a month and a half or 2 months. Because I had to wait for the insurance people to come out, and they were really busy because everyone else had the same hail damage that I had. So it was a big deal. And of course, eventually they replaced it. But my point is in a pinch, I was able to keep my house from getting water damage. And there's 1,000,001 other uses for duct tape. So, and zip ties as well. So also, I forgot to add it in here, but I just thought of this. Baling wire. Oh my God, baling wire. I mean, if it was a toss-up between duct tape and baling wire, I'd have a really hard time choosing, because both of them are so essential to everyday farm life, everyday homesteading life, everyday home ownership. I mean, you just need baling wire, you need duct tape, you need zip ties. So make sure you guys stock up on those while they're cheap. Again, great bartering items if it comes down to it in the end. Number 3, hygiene. So we're going to need shampoo, soap, deodorant, floss, toothpaste, and toothbrushes, and other like dental picks and other things like that you might want to have, because I'm assuming you won't be able to go see a dentist. At a certain point, you may want to have a book about that, like basic DIY dentistry. I mean, at a certain point, there's nothing you can do. Obviously, you can't do a filling at your house. All you can really do is pull that rotten tooth out. And that's what they used to do in the Wild West. So you might want to have some different tools if it comes to that. That's really long-term thinking, though. I mean, like, that's if the grid goes down and it stays down for years, which I've heard people talk about. That is totally not only possible, but maybe even probable. It's on the edge of probable, the way things are going. So keep your hygiene up, because that'll keep your health up. even if you have to do bucket baths, which I've had to do many times, out in the remote, cold Rocky Mountains up way up high at 8,700 feet when I was out there at the off-grid place. I had to do a lot of bucket baths. It's nice if you have a wood stove that you can heat that water up on, just to keep you from hitting the ceiling whenever you drop certain parts of your body into that water, because it's rough. Let me tell you, it's rough. I often wondered, my wife and I discussed it many times, how did humanity make it? Like through the pioneer days when you had to go down and take a bath in a cold stream. I mean, and quite frankly, they just didn't take baths. I mean, they might have wiped down with a wet rag once in a while or whatever, but I mean, as gross as you get, you'd have to almost burn that rag after you're done wiping down. So guys, keep your hygiene up and make sure you have plenty of supplies like that. Shampoo and soap and deodorant, that stuff has no shelf life. Toothpaste, you can probably stock up on that stuff. And again, a great bartering item for those that didn't think about it. And you guys know there's tons of them that didn't. So number 2, propane tanks for like your generators and stuff like that, and your cook stoves. So let's say right now that you have an electric range in your house. You know, if you're suddenly without power, how are you going to cook? You need to have some backup way of doing that. And probably the easiest, quickest way is get one of these outdoor grills that also has a side burner that runs on propane. That'd be great. And have plenty of propane on hand. It's getting more and more expensive as we get in the colder and colder months here. It's going to keep going up and up and up. So you probably ought to do that sooner rather than later. It has an edge over gasoline because propane, you can keep it in that tank virtually forever. I mean, the only weakness, I guess, would be the O-rings in the tank going bad over time or something like that. But I would say that's probably not going to happen, at least not in your lifetime, more than likely. So I would stock up on, you know, I don't know, however many you can afford propane and the tanks to store that propane in. And, you know, store them in a safe way, safe place, all that sort of thing. But, you know, I could see a guy having, you know, 5 to 10 propane tanks full in a shop building somewhere. That way, you know, you'd have a way to cook for a long, long time. And then you need to make sure your grill's going to hold up to that, because a lot of these cheaper grills, they'll burn out in a season. So I learned that lesson the hard way. So the last thing here, the last thing on the list, you're going to need some way to protect all of these other preps that we've been talking about in this video and in other videos. So as Neo said in The Matrix, guns, lots of guns. You're going to need guns. I mean, I hear these guys all the time. I don't know if they're leftists or what the deal is, or they're anti-gun, but I hear them talking about they're going to go out in the apocalypse with their katana sword or with their machete or, you know, whatever weird. And maybe it's good to have some bladed weapons around, no doubt about it. There are instances where a blade is superior over a firearm, but very few instances. So guns, lots of guns, and ammo if you can find that ammo, you know. I recommend for somebody that doesn't have anything, first of all, you're going to need to get into a serious deep dive on gun safety and training and stuff like that. You're going to want to be super safe about everything you do. And it'd be good to find somebody that's more experienced than you, that already has several different firearms, that they're willing to take you out to the range and let you fire. You're going to have to probably buy the ammo and provide the ammo, because ammo is super expensive and hard to come by right now. But if you've got a buddy that's got, you know, maybe a 9mm or something, you can go out to the range with them and fire that 9mm, you know, with their supervision, so that you don't hurt yourself or anybody else. But once you get good at it and you get comfortable with it, and you know how to break it down, you know how to work on it, you know how to clean it, all the different things. But most importantly, you know how and when to not pull an Alec Baldwin and end up shooting some innocent person and killing them, because that's the last thing you want to do. You're trying to defend yourself and your preps and your family, right? From bad actors, from people that might come in, marauders that might come in. And again, I believe there's about a 99% chance that gangs of marauders will form if the shit hits the fan, if the SHTF happens, like we're all thinking it's going to. So be prepared for that sort of thing. I mean, obviously a 9mm by itself going up against, you know, a crowd of 100+ people is probably not going to do a whole lot, except for if they know that you have that, they'll be less likely to target you first. And maybe you don't just have a 9mm. Maybe you've got a some sort of an AR or an AK variant that's over there as well that can put down a lot of firepower. I mean, you know, most of those are 25 or 30 round box magazines. And for any of this stuff, I would have a minimum of 6 magazines extra for each one, a minimum. And in my opinion, the higher the capacity, the better it is. So I really like the Glock 9mm, model 17, or a model, what's the other one? 19. 17 or 19, those are both excellent service size firearms that will be great for home defense. You're going to, again, need to be practiced up on it. You're going to need to know how to not be a threat to your family members, you know, because obviously if someone's in your house and you have to fire on them, you don't want to like have a stray bullet going back and hitting your daughter or son's bedroom or hitting your wife or something while she's sleeping. So you got to know where this stuff's going to go, and you got to really plan everything out and be really, really safe about it. I mean, overly safe about it. So anyways, I like those things. An AR or an AK is also a defense multiplier, so that's going to make you a harder target. It's going to harden you up more, especially if you're trained on it and you know how to use it, because that is a, you know, I don't know, safely you could say a 300-yard battle rifle for both of those things. And some would say you could take them out to 500 yards, but I wouldn't trust it to that far. And also my eyesight's not that good, so I would probably say 300 yards or less. Your AR, AK variant is going to be pretty good. And the AR is going to be a little better, a little farther out, I believe. So I don't know. That's what I have more experience with. I don't have as much experience with an AK. I hear they're really good and they're really durable and they have other advantages, but it's pretty hard to beat that 5.56 for a flat shooting defensive round. So another thing to consider is a 12 gauge. I like a 12 gauge pump action. You can do whatever you want, but I think pump actions are very reliable. They're sort of like the revolver of the shotgun world. There's just something about them. And when you hear the thud of a double-aught buck shell going up into the chamber as a criminal, I would imagine that's one of the most scariest things that you're ever going to hear in your life. If you're in someone's house and you're not supposed to be in their house, and then suddenly you hear that racking sound and that distinct sound that a 590 Mossberg makes or an 870 Remington makes as it's racking a live round into the chamber, if that doesn't make you crap your pants, you must just be out of your mind freaking crazy. And that would tell the homeowner something too. If the guy's not scared of that, that's going to tell you everything you need to know about this intruder. So I highly recommend a shotgun for self-defense. It's one of the best things you can have. Also, along those lines, and I actually thought about making a standalone video about this. I was talking to somebody else recently about this, and I think if I had to get rid of every single thing I had and only keep one thing, man, it would be hard for me to do. But I'd have to say it'd be the Ruger 1022 that I would keep, because it's just so good as an all-around SHTF prepper gun. I mean, it's in my opinion the best, because you can get the 25 round magazines for it. The Ruger magazines are the way to go with that, by the way. Don't get the other off-brand ones. Get the Ruger branded ones. They're flawless. I have yet to have a failure to feed with one, and they're relatively inexpensive, at least for now. So I really like the Ruger 1022. You can do anything from hunt squirrel to self-defense with it. Now, obviously, it's a 22. It's not as powerful as any of these other things we've talked about, but I mean, again, it'll get the job done. And the beautiful thing about a 22 is a 500 round box of Remington is like this big, and maybe a pound and a half or something. You could easily put that in your backpack and you'd have 500 rounds. Carrying 500 rounds of anything else is going to be a lot more heavy, you know. So there's just an advantage. You can carry so much ammo, and it's just, honestly, it's just the do everything round. It's not recommended to hunt deer with them, but people have done it. And if you're desperate and you're in a desperate situation, you can probably take anything in North America down with a 1022. Again, range is going to be a factor, but I hear somebody was telling me that I don't know if it's the FBI or who it is, but they do these tests on like, will it go through a piece of 1/2 inch plywood? And supposedly the 22 round will go through a piece of 1/2 inch plywood at like 400 yards. So if it'll go through 1/2 inch plywood, it's still deadly. That's their test, basically. So out to 400 yards. Now, you're going to have to shoot the thing, you know, like you're going to have to lob it up like an arrow probably at that distance. But the point is, it's doable. And you've got lots of ammo. And it's still, even though it's more expensive now, it's still the cheapest thing to go out and use for target practice and stuff like that. So, guys, those are my recommendations. Also, you may want to consider like some sort of a hunting rifle. You know, I struggle on this. I love the 30-30 round. I think it's a great round in certain parts of the United States. In other parts of the United States, if you're in much flatter country, you're going to need like at least a 30-06 or maybe a 7 mil or something like that. So that's going to be pretty area specific. In my area, I can use 30-30 and 308 bolt action. And that's what I like as a 308 bolt action for hunting with a scope on it. And then 30-30 for like hill to hill in the woods type of hunting, that sort of situation. I think that's your best bet. If you had those things and the ammo to put in them and the knowledge and know how to use them and clean them and all that other stuff we talked about, then you're going to be a lot better off than someone who didn't have these things. So guys, let me know if I missed anything. I'm sure there's other non-food items that you would consider essential that most people aren't thinking about. And in this community, that's one of the things I love about it, is down in the comments, a lot of times people they'll say something and it'll be like, oh man, I wish I'd have said that in the video. That's excellent. That's an excellent point. So I love reading your comments, and I think it's great for us to all share our ideas and stuff so that when the SHTF does come, we'll have a leg up, and we'll know there'll be more people out there that'll have a leg up on this thing. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and I stand for liberty. I hope you do too.